All right, here we go. Today we have mobster John "Red" Shea, former associate of kingpin Whitey Bulger and Boston's Winter Hill Gang. And I want to point out, never snitched. Welcome to VladTV.
Thank you, Vlad. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Very interesting story. And you actually have a new book out, Rat Bastards.
It's been out a while, but it's a New York Times bestseller, as you can see.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. So a lot of this story we actually got from the book. So everyone who's listening, if you want a more detailed explanation of this, definitely go get the book. Well, it's your first time here. I want to start in the very beginning. So you grew up in South Boston.
The largest Irish enclave in Boston, a very tight Irish knit neighborhood.
Right, and that's known as Southie?
Southie, that's correct.
Okay, and this was a fairly rough background.
So Southie, you had a lot of, they had politicians, and again, Whitey Bulger's brother was one of the biggest politicians in the state, Billy Bulger. You had doctors, you had lawyers, and you had gangsters. You had it all in Southie. Mm-hmm. And but one thing in Southie, not just the intelligence of people really that came from Southie, but you had to be tough, growing up in a neighborhood. You got punched in the mouth, you defended yourself. And if you couldn't fight that well, you still defended yourself the best you could. Because if you didn't, you'd get eaten alive.
Well, yeah, in the book you said how everyone had a baseball bat in their car.
Yeah, I mean, it was a different era back then, too.
Right, you said even the nuns would whoop you.
Oh, forget about it. Catholic nuns, forget about it. I had them Catholic nuns hit me with rulers and everything else and pointer sticks or whatever they had at the age of 6 years of age, over my shoulder and breaking. And of course, I was a class clown in front of the class, and I'd laugh after they did it. And then I'd be sent into the closet, and I'd have to stand in the middle, in the corner of the closet, if you will.
Well, in the book, you actually described it as one of the last urban white ghettos.
Yes.
Okay, so you grew up with your mom and 3 sisters. And your dad got thrown out of the house when you were born?
When I was very young, yeah. My father was thrown out of the house because he had the curse. He had the Irish curse. He was an alcoholic. And he actually died when I was about 9 years of age. I didn't know him. I visited him like once or twice with my sisters in a place that he was living in, Southie. And yeah, he died of cirrhosis of the liver.
From drinking too much.
Yep, you got it.
Okay, now you started boxing when you were 5 years old?
5 years of age, and I believe you saw the pictures in there of 5 years of age of me boxing.
Okay, I mean 5 is pretty young though.
It is, but back then, I got beaten up by older kids in the neighborhood, and I come running home so angry one day, and I wanted to grab a weapon, even at that age, to go beat up the older kids with a weapon. And my sister said, "You're not doing that." And she come out, she went down the street, and she beat the shit out of these 2 boys. And she went into the home, and she took the coat rack that was in the corner of the foyer of the home, and she beat them with the coat rack. And I'm grateful for my sister for that day, being so young, because my sister is almost just about a 10 years difference in age. And she said after that, she grabbed me by the hand and she said, "You're going to the gym in Southie and you're going to learn how to box."
Okay, so in 1973, you started boxing. A year later, that's when they actually start busing kids from other neighborhoods.
That is
into
correct.
Your school. And was this like the first major city to do this?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And it was, let me tell you, it was horrific. It was horrific. The rioting, the police escorts, the U.S. Marshals, you name it, the throwing stones and rocks at the buses, the black kids being on those buses and stuff. I was just a young man, and I remember that distinctly and vividly. And I have to say, every kid in Southie, every kid that went to public school in Southie was held out. They boycotted from going to school. And in all reality, that only hurt the kids like myself growing up. Eventually, I went back to school, but they actually opened up a school called the South Boston Heights Academy. And I went to that school as a private school, And we had no money. My mother had no money, but she gave what she worked cleaning floors, doing whatever she could to get me into that school. And of course, I failed that school because I was a class clown there too, unfortunately.
Right. So they basically took black kids from the black neighborhoods and put them on a bus and brought them to
Into
Boston,
a white neighborhood.
Into a white neighborhood. Then they took white kids and put them in black neighborhoods.
That is correct.
Into the black schools.
That is correct.
And this ended up being a disaster pretty much?
And I was one of those kids, yeah. I mean, it didn't work out well. It really didn't. And they call that, today they call that, and they look back and they go, did that really work out that well? And really didn't, because it hurt a lot of education for kids. Now, when I was going to school, I had to revert backwards. I had to revert. Now, I was, a grade above of what they wanted to revert back to. I said, listen, I already learned this. As a kid, I said, I already learned this last year. I know this. Well, they had to drop the educational level because the other kids weren't up to par to that. So I was still stuck in that because it was the school system, the Boston school system. And I couldn't afford to go anywhere else. And I had to go back into it. So that said, they call that kids that grew up in that era the lost generation.
Okay, so you're going to high school. When did you first hear about Whitey Bulger?
Wow, I heard about Whitey when I was a young boy. And my uncle, his brother used to run around with Whitey when they were kids. And they used to rob trucks together and hijack trucks and everything else. So Whitey was a friend of the family, if you would. And then eventually, when I was 15 years of age, or 16, about 15, sorry, and I was boxing and all that with all the guys from the gym, and they were older guys that were involved with Whitey at that time. And I was gravitating to those guys because not only were they, tough guys and good boxers, but they were in illegal activities, but they were making plenty of money. And they had the power, they had the money, and I gravitated towards that because I didn't have anything. I didn't have a father. And I looked up to these guys that were older than me as father figures.
And Whitey was known as the mayor of Southie.
Yeah, and there's no doubt about it. I mean, Whitey was he was a very special individual, if you would. Everybody looked at Whitey like he was the man, if you will. And he was at the time. I mean, some people, if they had problems in the neighborhood, instead of going to the cops, they'd go to Whitey, and Whitey would go out of his way sometimes and just squash it for them,
So he essentially was the boss of the Irish mob.
He was.
Okay. And like you said, his older brother was the president of the Massachusetts Senate.
And he was stronger than the governor.
Oh.
Billy Bulger was stronger than the governor.
Right. So you have this powerful mob boss and this powerful politician, and they're brothers.
Exactly.
Kind of crazy.
It doesn't get any stronger in Massachusetts than that at the time.
In the book, you had talked about Whitey had done some prison time allegedly for a sex crime, but he didn't really want to talk about it.
Yeah, but his real crime was robbing banks throughout the Midwest and stuff like that. And that's what he went away to Alcatraz for, and Atlanta also.
Okay, but was there any sex crimes that he was doing?
Not that I know of.
Okay, but there was something in the book that kind of implied
Yeah,
that.
Not that I know of.
Well, before you got to know Whitey, a war had broken out in Boston called the Killeen-Mullen War?
Yep, that is correct.
Okay, explain what that war was about.
Well, it was a fraction of two different groups of men. And, one guy got in a problem with a woman, and the woman, he grabbed the woman, and then another guy, it was his girl, and he was from another fraction. And it all started with that. And a lot of guys died during that time.
Right. So Killeen was a loan shark, and Whitey worked for him.
Yes. Whitey was younger than him, and he was up and coming at that time.
Okay. So Whitey worked for Killeen, but then there was another Irish rival called the Mullen Gang, which was led by Tommy King.
That is correct.
And a war broke out between them. And Tommy had a connection to the Winter Hill Gang.
That is correct.
Right? So that's kind of how this war sort of broke out, and it was over a woman.
Yes.
Okay. But at one point, they kind of settled their differences and came together?
They settled differences. Differences were settled, and Whitey ended up with the Winter Hill Gang and Howie Winters, and along with Stevie Flemmy.
Okay, so then
the rifleman.
Sorry, go ahead.
Along with Stevie Flemmy, the rifleman.
Okay, so Tommy King and Whitey Bulger became bosses.
Well, Tommy King had his own gang, and Whitey was with the Winter Hill Gang, and eventually Whitey ended up taking out Colleen, and then he ended up taking out Tommy King.
Right, and after the dust settled, and there were 6 murders, Whitey basically became the boss.
Whitey became the boss of everything.
So you yourself, you're not part of all this yet.
No.
You're still going to high school, but then you drop out in the 10th grade.
That is correct. And
that's when you start getting into crime?
Well, that's when I was, I was doing things before that. I was, robbing trucks and stuff like that, and stuff, and selling marijuana at that time. And then eventually I get into the cocaine business. But that was until a little later.
So at what point do you meet Whitey Bulger? How old are you?
15, I was introduced.
15 years old?
Yeah.
Okay, was it like a sophomore in high school?
If that. I didn't even know what school was at the time.
Okay, so you end up leaving school, and then at what point do you actually hook up with Whitey?
At that point, I was running with the guys that were associated with Whitey.
Okay.
And those guys were selling drugs, selling the cocaine, because they had a big cocaine business. And I was boxing and selling cocaine at the same time to support myself as I boxed. And eventually, I started becoming bigger. I was fighting pro at that time because I was a little older at that time now. After me winning multiple championships and Golden Gloves and stuff like that, as an open class fighter. There's a difference between open class and novice and the Golden Gloves. I never went into the novice because I had so much experience from the juniors. So that said, I ended up becoming a pro, and I went to California. And the reason why I wanted to go to California is because I wanted to start my pro career there, and because most fighters that came from New England, when they left New England and went outside of New England, they didn't do that well. So I knew that. So I said, well, I want to leave New England, start in California with all the Mexicans out there, which I did. I trained with them all. I had my pro fights out there, started with them. And I said, I can always work my way back to New England because I know what I can do in New England. I know I can win in New England because I was one of the top amateur fighters there and up-and-coming professional.
Okay, but eventually that doesn't work out, so you moved back to Boston.
It does not work out. I came back. I said, listen, I'm gonna continue to do the boxing, but I was still doing the drugs. I wasn't intense yet with the drugs. I was training in Rhode Island with Vinny Pazienza, 5-time world champion. Me and him fought on the same cards together with Lou Duver in Atlantic City. And Lou Duver one day yelled at me because I didn't show up for training because Vinny got cut by another champion we were doing round robins with, Rocky Lockridge. And so I figured, Vinny's cut, I don't have to go. And we stayed at the motel for the day. And Lou said, where the hell were you? He said, where the hell were you? Started yelling at me. And one thing about me is me and yelling don't get along. It just don't get along. So I said, okay, see you later. I get up and I went back to Boston. Holy behold, Lou Duva, one day he calls my attorney, Tony Cardinelli, and he says, where's this Red Shea? Where's this Irish kid? He was doing so good down here in the gym. He was training great. He's good. He's got great talent. Where is he? Tony says, I don't know. I don't know where he's been. And one day, I show up at Tony's office. I'm wearing a Rolex, but a presidential. I got a beautiful car. And I said, Tony, a friend of mine's in trouble. Can you please help him out? And he did. And Tony goes, what the hell are you doing? He says, by the way, I don't want to know what you're doing, but whatever you're doing, Johnny, stop. Because he didn't want to see me get in trouble.
Right, because when you got back, you started dealing cocaine
Heavily.
and marijuana.
Heavily. When I got back, I was dealing heavily in the cocaine business. And I was dealing with Whitey's guys. I was selling cocaine with them. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to get my own source. I'm going to have my own source where I can get it cheaper. And I end up getting a source in Florida. And I went all the way down to the Keys in Florida for my first kilo. I went down there. I brought down $20,000 at the time. And the person said to me, I said, the guy says to me, hey, I need the money up front. I said, what do I look like an idiot? No, seriously, I need the money up front. I need to know that you're not a cop. I turned to the person that was introducing me and I said, are you guaranteeing this? They said, yes. I said, here's the money. I took the chance because that person said they were guaranteeing it. The guy, hours and hours go by, he doesn't come back. I figured, fuck, I lost the 20 grand, right? As a young guy, I'm like, that's a lot of money, you know? Okay. The guy comes back at midnight, with the kilo of cocaine. I wanted to hug him. Hey, thanks for coming back, right?
Right.
And let me tell you, the stuff was the real deal. So I was happy that he came back. I strapped the cocaine to my body and I flew back from Miami to Boston. And that's where it all began. And it just enveloped to a larger amount of cocaine monthly.
Well, you started selling cocaine in Boston, but Whitey Bulger is the mob boss of Boston. And
That is correct.
How you describe as lone wolves, basically dealing on his turf.
That's correct.
Basically what you were doing.
I was.
So you were taking a risk.
I was.
Right. Something that can get you killed at the time?
I did. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But see, the thing about me is, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it isn't. I don't like to brag about it, but I got big balls. That's just what it comes down to. And I took the chance. Why not? Because if you don't take a chance in life, are you ever going to really make it? If you don't, you got to take chances. Anyone who knows that, you have to take chances. Because if you don't take the chance, are you really going to make it? And that's how I thought of it at a young age. So, yeah, you're right. I took the chance. And his guys came to me. They said, hey, Red, I see you got a brand new BMW. I see you got a beautiful Rolex. I see, you don't get as much from us like you used to. I said, nope, I don't. How come? I said, and I told him straight up. I said, because I got another connection. You do? Yes. And this is the head guy for Whitey. I said, yeah, I do. He said, let's talk about it. I said, what do you want to talk about? Why don't you join us? Why don't you come in with us, Red? You have the connection. We could use that connection because our connection isn't that great. I said, okay. He said, and at the same time, you get to keep your customers. Your customers don't have to be brought in to us. That's a no-brainer. That's even more money for me. That's a lot more money for me. So I said, let me think about it. Let me get back to you tomorrow. Red, don't think too long, he said. I said, take it easy. Relax. The next day I come back. I said, let's do it. So I was the head guy that ran all the drugs from Florida from Boston to Florida and back. Not only did I do that, but I was like the chemist. I was the guy who was able to put everything together and have it distributed out to the couriers.
The guy that approached you, was that Mickey O?
That is Mickey O, but his real name is, and you'll get a kick out of this because now I can say this because he's dead and he testified against Whitey in the trial of Whitey's trial. His name was Billy Shea, same as last name as me, no relation.
Okay. Well, you end up getting a different connect in Florida from a guy you called Tony Montana.
I call him Tony Montana because he acted that way.
Same kind of party lifestyle.
Oh
and
my
everything
God,
else like
this
that.
guy was snorting cocaine. You should have seen the cocaine he was. He'd put a pile of cocaine there, and then he'd take a line. The line had to be that thick. I don't know how he even got it up his nose. It was so much. I mean, it was crazy. And this guy was high every single day. Now I didn't do any of it. I didn't. I just wanted to go in, do business, and get out. I used to dye my hair. And wear a baseball cap and act like I was a college kid, if you will, just to stay low-key and undercover. Because I'm going into an area of all Spanish and everything else, and they see a red-headed, blue-eyed white kid from Boston down there. Hey, what's going on here, right? I mean, think about it.
So do you actually join the Winter Hill Gang?
The Winter Hill Gang was dissipated at that time.
Oh, okay.
It was just the Irish mob with Whitey Bulger.
Okay, so did you officially join the Irish mob?
Yes.
Was there like an initiation like the Italian mob?
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
Okay,
I'll hold
We're
you to
not
that.
done yet.
We're not done yet. Okay, so now you're working with Whitey directly. And you said...
So I'm not working with Whitey directly, but I am a part of his crew, if you will.
Okay.
At that time. So the guy Billy Shea says to me in the deal, I keep my customers. Mm-hmm. I said, beautiful. That's a no-brainer. And I get to make the money from their customers. Beautiful. We used to split up money every 2 weeks. We'd go into the house. We'd put the money, bags of money all over the table. And we'd have money machines going off and everything else. And just spewing money. I mean, as a young guy, I'd walk out with $100,000, or even more, depending on how good of a month it had been, weeks that it's been. I mean, that's a lot of money for a young guy walking out with a duffel bag full of cash every couple of weeks. I mean, yeah, it was amazing. I miss those days.
Well, right, because you were what, like about 20, 21 at the time?
Yeah.
Like, what was the most number you got at one time?
We were on a monthly basis, so I'd travel monthly. I wanted to have even more, but he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to invest that type of money just in case something went wrong. So, I got that. So we were doing anywhere 15, 20, 25, 30.
That's a lot, though.
Yeah, I mean,
You're getting them for how much?
At that time, I was getting them for like 15 grand.
Okay, so
18,000.
Right, so you're talking about $300,000 transactions.
Easy, yeah. I'd get on with the 300 grand cash. Here you go. Let's do business. Now, I ran into a problem in Florida. The guy that I was dealing with, my connect, he must have told somebody, and somebody told somebody, and I was in the car, with my driver. We were on our way, and with the guy who was who had the connection to get the, and all of a sudden, and I still today believe it was the Riverside cops in Florida that used to shake down and rob them and everything else. I don't know that for a fact, but I believe it was. So all of a sudden, we're leaving his house, broad daylight. We're driving down the street. Cars come from everywhere and surround us. They jump out of the cars with and everything else. I was like, oh, great. This is perfect, right? I said, here we go. I thought they were saying that they're law enforcement. They took us out of the car, put us on a lawn, and an old woman, a Spanish woman, come out of the home, and she's like, "Oh my God." And the guy I was with, he said, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" And he made a move, and the guy, they had the on us, and the guy with the, he was pumped it, clicked it when he made a move, and I turned to him and I told him, "Shut the up. Shut up," because you know why? I'm already thinking in my mind faster than this guy next to me's thinking. I'm thinking, okay, this is over with. They're going to get away with the money. But in my mind, there's always a will. Where there's a will, there's a way. I'm going to get my money back. I guarantee you. I guarantee you. This is going through my mind as a young man in a situation like that. And I think boxing is part of the help that made me think that way, because, in boxing, you always got to be thinking, because, hey, you get hit with a good shot, you got to be able to adjust and move and get back into the game. So that's how I was thinking. And I told him to shut up, because if you're dead, I'm not going to be able to get that back. So he shut up. They took the car, they took the money. I told the guy that brought us, I said, "I'm going to tell you something, and I mean this. I mean this. I'm blaming you for this. This is all on your shoulders. If you don't bring me, and I'll pay you back." That's what I told him. "I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to kill you right here and right now. I'm going to kill you. You're dead." That guy, he went, he got a few, brought him back to me. I had a home in Orlando, Florida, that I used to have a base, and it's a lot further than Miami. And he drove us back there because I had another car in Miami. I drove down from Orlando with a rental car. So it was a rental car that they stole, along with the money. He got me I went back, I drove back home. I got my money back, believe it or not. He called me, he said, John, do you have my money? Do you have my money I goes, "Listen, you're lucky that I didn't leave you down there." I said, "You're not getting a nickel, and I'm done with you. I'm finished." But John, nothing. Click. I got a new source. I got another source. And it was great. I didn't have to travel. They dropped it right off to my door in Boston for me. And for the same price.
And this came from where?
This came from South America that was flown in.
Okay, Colombia?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever think to try to actually go to Colombia to actually get a better plug?
No, but somebody had mentioned, they said, "Hey, I got in an argument with one of my guys one day that was I was supplying, and this was caught on tape. They had a recording in a mailbox, a U.S. mailbox, and I was standing near the mailbox, and I was talking to him. He said, and he was trying to, get me to give him a better price. Now I was giving him the best price that he could ever get anywhere, but he wanted more. He was getting greedy. I said, "Hey, what are you looking for? What the do you want?" I says, "I'm already giving you a great price." I said, "You're asking for too much." I said, "Oh, you want me to fly to Colombia and bring it back for you?" And I said, "Two." So no, I would have never went to Colombia because I was smarter than that. I like staying on my own soil, if you will.
Okay. At one point, you meet Kevin Weeks, who was Whitey's main enforcer.
I knew Kevin since I was a kid. He was a boxer also.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he was working for Whitey.
And he was Whitey's, Whitey's tough guy, if you will. And Kevin could handle himself. And Kevin was like an older brother to me, you know?
Well, at one point, you got summoned to meet with Whitey.
And this is where it comes in. Thank you.
There we go.
So after all that was said with Billy Shea, the boss, wanted me to have my own customers. And at that time, he said to me, and by the way, Red, when you bring the kilos back, take a little bit out and sell it to your customers and give me a piece of that. I didn't like that. That's not who I am. If I'm with you, I'm doing business with you, and we're a team, I'm not looking to fuck you. I'm not looking to screw you. I didn't like that. So I thought about it. I mentioned to a friend of mine. I said, this son of a bitch, he wants me to do this. I said, he's kind of putting me in a bad position because he's going to weaken the product. And if you weaken the product, they're going to know and they're going to complain, and then it's going to fall on who? Me. So I mentioned it to a friend of mine. He says, well, you know, not for nothing, Red. He said, he is the boss, right? I said, yeah. He said, and you're only doing what the boss asks, right? I went, yeah. He said, so if the guys on the crew ask you, say, talk to the boss. Makes sense? I said, yeah, you're right. So I left it at that. So, of course, what I said comes to fruition. The guys come in the crew. They complain. They went to fucking Whitey. They went to Whitey. And then they came to me. I said, hey, don't talk to me. Go talk to the boss. Whoa, he said you. I goes, oh yeah, I'm sure he did say me. So they went back to Whitey with it. And Whitey said, you know what? I know that young guy. I know the guy. I know the characters, the two characters. I know the boss. I know it was his scheme. I know it is. The young guy wouldn't have done that without his okay. He's loyal. So Billy Shea was living in Florida. He got a phone call. He said, they said, you got to come back to Boston. You got to come back. Whitey wants to talk to you. He wants to see you. Is everything okay? You know, he was nervous. Yeah, everything's okay. He wants to see you. Oh, Whitey, Stevie, they got a hold of him, and they told him, listen, you made me a lot of money over the years. What you did is wrong. And the only reason I'm not killing you is because you made me a lot of money. But you're going to retire from this. Go back to Florida and don't ever fucking come back again. Do you understand me? He was shaking his boots, you know, because he was lucky. He was saying in his own mind, Jesus Christ, I could have been whacked right now. And he was mad at me. Fuck him. Mad at me for what? Because you were trying to throw me under the bus? I knew the score, what you're going to do. And guess what? I was a young guy. Whitey knew that. He knew I wasn't trying to pull a stunt like that. So he got sent down. He got sent away. So I get a call. And I say, yeah, I'll be there. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I'll meet you in a minute. Kevin Weeks. I get the call. I go into they had a Rotary store. I go into the store. It's empty. He says, I want to show you something in the basement. We got, yeah, sure. What is it? Not thinking, thinking that, nothing's wrong. I get down in the basement. Yeah, what do you want to show me? I turn around. And there they are with me with Uzis on me in the basement.
So Whitey
and Kevin
both have Uzis.
And he says, tell us about your friends, your other friends. How much money do they have? Guys that were doing business, I was doing business with. And I said to him, I said to him, whatever money they have is the money that I helped them make. That money comes from me. So then all of a sudden, they cocked the Uzi. Tell us about them. I said, I'm not telling you anything. I just told you, whatever they have is all through me. Now do what you have to fucking do. That's exactly what I told them. Do what you have to fucking do. I was ready to die at that moment. I don't know how many people that do that in life. Do you?
Yeah, not too many.
I wasn't going to give my friends up for fucking nothing, Vlad. And I'm that way today. And that's why I don't like informants. And that's why I don't like rats. And when I hear excuses from these rats, it makes me sick. Because, you know, they say, oh, Red Shea was only facing 12 years at the time. Well, you know what? I wasn't facing 12 years. I was facing 20 to life. I had an 848. That's a kingpin status in the federal code. That's 20 to life. I was facing 20 to life in prison. When I was interrogated, they said to me, you know, you're getting at least 40 fucking years. And I was handcuffed, of course. And I was getting yelled at. So why don't you tell us everything? So I said to him, I stood up and I said, does it get any worse than life? Does it get any worse than life? End of fucking story. That was the end of the interrogation. And then they put me into like a holding closet, not even a cell, a closet with a door. No windows, no nothing to try to make me turn and torture me. I wouldn't do it. I would never do it. Even if you ratted against me, I wouldn't do it, Vlad. You know why?
Why is that?
Because that's, when we grew up in Southie, you never ratted on anybody. That was the code. And the same way in the mafia world, whether it's the Irish mob or the Italian mob or the Russian mob, the same thing. It's no different. You do not rat at all.
Well, when you didn't tell on your friends, Whitey says that was actually a test to see what you would do.
And that's when he said it was all a test.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be the guy now, Red. You're going to be the guy.
Right. So you took over Whitey Bulger's drug business.
I took it over.
And that was his biggest revenue stream.
Yes, his biggest revenue entity.
How much were you guys making per month?
Vlad, I mean, like I said, I was walking away at that time every 2 weeks, 150,000 in my pocket as a young kid at that time. And then it became even more because I was selling even more at that time. So just do the math, you know?
Well, now you're working with Whitey directly. And you learned a few things about the way that Whitey operates. I find this part interesting. So these are Whitey's rules. Don't do anything in haste or anger. Always have the radio on when talking business. Dress inconspicuously, not like the fucking Italians.
Yep.
Have your fun out of town.
Yep.
Put your women in white cars so you can spot them.
Yeah, he loved doing that with his women.
And the most important thing as a gangster, don't do anything someone can hold over you.
That is correct.
Explain the last part.
I think he was talking about, you know, if you're going to whack someone, do it alone. That way no one could ever hold it over your head.
During this time, when you take over the drug business, was Whitey killing people?
At that time, no. I think he did all his killing prior to that. And I don't think anybody was looking to anger him by any means.
Okay. So you weren't involved in any of those things?
I was not involved in any murders with Whitey Bulger.
It was just the drugs?
Yes.
Okay. So you started to crank up and get more product. And at one point, you hooked up with a guy named Jesus?
Jesus, yes.
And that became your main connect?
That is correct. And after Jesus, as I said, I had another connection.
On top of that?
That was delivered to my door in Boston.
Got it. And Whitey himself had no kids, no wife.
Well, he had a kid, but nobody really knew about it.
Oh, okay.
And it didn't come out till years later. And that kid died when he was young.
Got it. But in general, he was just a cold
He had no kids.
That
he could come and go and whenever he needed. And he always had that escape plan, if you will. He had safety deposit boxes throughout Europe and stuff like that for him to go on the run if he ever needed to.
Whitey has this Irish mob situation in Boston, but was the Italian mafia also working within Boston during that time?
Absolutely. They worked hand in hand. But at the same time, the Italian mob ended up going down, and it was because Whitey and Stevie Fleming were giving information to the FBI to take them down.
Right. So Whitey was working with an FBI guy named Connolly?
John Connolly, that's correct.
John Connolly. So they were partnered together, and he would feed them information about his enemies. Was it just Italian mafia or other guys as well?
Oh, no, Whitey was telling about everybody. I mean, seriously. I mean, with this come out in the end, after it all broke open, we found out that he was giving information about even his own people, including myself. There was a commission in the head of the FBI, second in charge, and he got word by the DEA in Washington. And he said, we're going to target these guys in Boston for drugs. And we're going to go after these guys. So the second in charge of the FBI says, oh, okay. Oh, all right. So then he come out of the meeting, he grabs his guy, and he says, aren't those guys our guys in Boston working for us? And the guy goes, yeah, they are. He said, call Boston immediately and let them know that the DEA is coming and there's nothing we can do about it, to chill out and be careful. But that was okay with Whitey. He didn't care because you know why? He had a young guy that would never rat on him.
In the FBI?
You're looking at him.
Oh, you mean. Okay, sorry.
Me. He knew, even if I got caught, he knew I'd never rat because of the test. And basically, you'd think he could have told me, hey, Red, we're going to slow down operation, chill out for a while. There's an investigation. We want to just shut down operation for now. We can always open it back up. You'd think he would have done that. And I got a feeling, my antennas, if you will, were going off because I was being followed by many DEA agents and law enforcement. And I'm saying, I went to him and I explained it to him. I told him who they were, this and that, what they looked like. And he told me who they were. He told me. He played both sides so well. And so I knew who they were. And one day, one of them came by and I goes, excuse me, officer. And the guy next to me says, that ain't a cop. I goes, it ain't? Excuse me, sir. Puts on his window. He goes, yeah? I said, you work out of organized crime unit. That's who you are. And he looked at me, he goes, you're a smart guy, Red. The guy next to me, his jaw dropped. How did I know? Whitey told me. So Whitey played both sides well. So I said to Whitey at the time, I goes, listen, maybe we should stop. maybe you should stop and just give it. I want to take a step back. I'll go back to boxing, do some boxing, and and stuff like that. He said, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to stop? Just stay off the phone, stay away, be careful where you speak and stuff like that. And my antennas at that time were like, this doesn't make sense to me. But, I was a young guy and I'm going to listen to him, right? Because I'm loyal. And I said, yeah, I like to go back to boxing and everything. He goes, you don't want to do that. You don't want to go back to boxing because you'll be on TV and people will see you. You don't want to be seen on TV. So I said, listen, I hear you. I listened to him. I continued to do what I was doing. And then eventually shit hit the fan. 52 of us were indicted.
But with Whitey working with the FBI, he knew when things were about to happen. So when the state police were going to bug the Lancaster street garage, he knew about it.
Yes.
He knew that his car was bugged.
Yes.
He knew everything before it happened because the FBI would tell him.
And they actually found the bug with the bug detector device.
Right. At one point, he became a partner in a winning lottery ticket.
That is correct.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was a guy who's deceased now. They're both deceased. The guy worked for Whitey. He was one of Whitey's guys. Linsky, Pat Linsky, and his brother. He gave a ticket to his brother for a present, a gift, and the brother ended up hitting a mass lottery for millions of dollars. So Whitey went to Pat and he says, I want that ticket. That way he could launder the money. He could show money and launder money.
Okay.
I know he got the ticket, and I can guarantee you the money that he gave him for that ticket wasn't what they really got.
Right.
It was, you take this money and give me that ticket, otherwise you won't have a ticket, you won't be getting anything. He gave him an ultimatum, if you will.
Well, at one point you get arrested for assault and battery of a federal officer.
Yeah, when what they did is they did major raids throughout Southie, and they were raiding the stores of Whitey and stuff like that, and homes, and they were gathering information. They weren't arresting anybody, but they were gathering computers and information and stuff like that. So I happened to ride by to check it out because I got wind of it. I said, "Oh shit!" So I said, let me take off for a couple of days here." So I go to take off for a couple of days. I go to a second-hand car that I had. And I had the hood open of the second-hand car. And I go to shut the hood down, and the street was a line of federal agents. And then I turned around and looked, and there was another line of federal agents. So, excuse me, if I went to run, there was nowhere for me to go because they had so many agents from one sidewalk across the street to the other sidewalk, a line, literally a line. There was so many of them. And they said, "Where you going, Red?" "I'm not going anywhere. None of your business." "Well, we want to go into your home." I said, "You got a warrant?" "You know I got a fucking warrant." And then from there, that's, like I said, when me and Yellen don't get along, the anger come out of me, and we end up in a little fisticuffs, if you will. And of course, I wasn't going to win, no matter how tough I am, because it was just too many. I had an army against me. So they end up getting me, restrained me, cuffed me, brought me up into my place that overlooked Boston. It was a beautiful place in Southie. And they went through my whole apartment, searching for stuff. They didn't find any drugs or anything like that, but they did find plenty of bullets and guns. So that was one of the charges I was getting charged with, for the guns and stuff like that, and the bullets. They asked me, you have some heavy bullets here. why do you have these caliber bullets? Where were the guns to that? Of course, I wouldn't answer them. And that was one of my charges. Having bullets, if you will. And then they arrested me for assault and battery on a federal officer. I was brought into court. I was the only one arrested that day. Nobody else got arrested. My attorney at the time, Tony Cardinelli, came, and I ended up getting out on bail. And when I knew that they were listening to myself now on the phones at my place. And of course, I had neighbors, and there was an older woman next door that knew me, and she knew my mom from years back, tight-knit Irish neighborhood. And the guy behind me, another Irish guy, tight-knit Irish neighborhood, American Irish, that is. And I said on the phone, I used that to my advantage. I said, yeah, I have the neighbors are coming out to my advantage for this assault and battery against a federal officer, and they witnessed everything. They're gonna come in on my behalf. Holy behold, they dropped the charges. That's because they had the big stuff coming from me.
Right. Because that arrest happened in 88?
No.
The DEA arrest, the whole assaulting the officer thing. That happened in 88?
It was 89, I believe.
89, right. Because in 1990, the big charges came down.
That is correct.
51 people from Whitey Bulger's crew were arrested, including yourself.
And I was the head of that.
Right. But what's interesting is that Whitey never got arrested.
And by the way, one of the FBI, we found out later, when we get in, when a few of us were sent at the time to Danbury, Connecticut, when it was a men's prison. And that Monday, it was in the Boston Herald front page saying Whitey a canary because he didn't get indicted with us. So that was leaked by one of the FBI agents that he was dealing with, Morris, because he actually threatened Morris. And Morris figured, well, let me leak that to maybe, get him whacked. So the guys I were with were going, they seen the paper, and they said, Whitey's ratting. If he's ratting, we got a rat. I sat back at a young age, and all these guys are much older than me. I sat back, and I just watched, and I observed, and I listened. I was loyal to Whitey, because I didn't believe he was a rat. And I'm going to get to that even more.
Well, you get arrested, and they charge you with a continuing criminal enterprise.
A CCE.
CCE. Is that the equivalent of a RICO, pretty much?
It is, yes.
Right. You were facing...
But much higher numbers.
Right, because you're facing 20 to life.
That is correct.
Okay, so now you're locked up.
So these guys, they were squirming and squabbling about, we gotta beat Whitey to the punch. Whitey's already a rat. If he's a rat, you ain't beating anything to a punch. So I heard them. I heard one of the guys talk about it. So I grabbed him, and I took him for a walk in the courtyard of the prison. I said, listen, I'm going to tell you this, and this is what I know. And Whitey said this too. It got back to me already. He said they're going to say things to try to discredit me because they can't get me. He said, that's exactly what he said to me. They're going to try to discredit me and say things because they can't get me. So I said, well, that makes sense. Federal government, I mean, they do that shit all the time, right? So I took this individual for a walk around the the yard. I said, first of all, don't believe everything you hear from the federal government. They're trying to make you roll. So they're going to tell you and say anything and put things out there to make you roll. Because that's what they want. And you're falling for it. I said, but there's a caveat. I said, but even if Whitey is a fucking rat, where we come from, and you're one of the guys who preached it from the neighborhood, no matter what, never become a fucking rat. Just remember that. I never heard another word about, oh, we should say this or we should do that ever again. I sent that information back to Whitey immediately, what was happening, what they were saying.
Well, at one point you changed lawyers, and you get John Gotti's lawyer.
No, I got Richard Egbert, because Whitey didn't want me to be with Tony Cardinelli, and Tony was a high-end mob lawyer at the time. He was the lead attorney on the Italians when they got indicted in Boston. And he represented Fat Tony Salerno, and he was on the Gotti case, right. And that's where that comes from. Whitey wanted me to go with another lawyer called by the name of Richard Egbert. And Richard Egbert was a fantastic lawyer also. And he was paying for it. So I listened to him.
Right. It was a $750,000 bail.
Yes.
And Whitey actually put up the money.
Yes.
Okay. It's a pretty big move right there. So basically you
So
felt
I
like
got the
Whitey,
lawyer. I get the lawyer.
Yeah.
I get billed out. Well, I didn't get billed out. I get billed out after we fought for 1 year.
Yeah.
I was 1 year fighting to get out on the bracelet. 1 year. And we eventually won. And I was on the bracelet. You know, and Richard Egbert was my lawyer at that time. And Whitey felt secure with that because he didn't trust Tony Cardinelli, because if Cardinelli dug and he found out, he would have found out. He would have found out if Whitey was a rat or not. And that's why Whitey wanted me to go with Richard Egbert, because Richie would have left it alone, because if he was, I think he knew. I think he knew Whitey was a rat. And he worked with him. So that said, Richie was going to do his best that he could for me. Anything he could for me, and fight and fight and fight. Richie was a hell of a lawyer. Very, very intelligent guy. Very good lawyer. And he represented a lot of mob guys too in Boston. But Tony, if he found out Whitey was a rat, it would have been over for Whitey at that moment. Whitey would have been had back then. That's why he didn't want me with Cardinelli.
Okay, so your lawyer starts to negotiate with the feds, and ultimately...
I was the last guy to negotiate,
right.
By the way.
And you pled guilty to distribution, trafficking, and a managerial charge.
That is correct.
And they wanted 15 years, but you finally settled on 11 years, 4 months, including time served.
That is correct. I had 12 years total, just about 12 years.
You didn't feel confident to go to trial?
No, my lawyer told me, Richie said, I said, first of all, I'd like to cut this fucking bracelet off and take the fuck off right now. Let's put it that way, Richie. I said, and even Tony Cardinelli, because I was still in contact with Tony Cardinelli, he said, John, you got an obligation here. You got to do this. Instead of taking off, you got to do this. Because you got to close the door. You're the guy to close the door here, Johnny. Once you plead, that case is over with. It's done. You're the last of the Mohegans. They got to go through you to get him on this. I said, I know. The deal's done. I don't have a problem. Let's do it. Now, mind you, 12 years is a long time in prison. Over a decade in prison is a long time for anyone.
Yeah.
And even more is even worse, right? But here I was at the time ready to do 20 to life. So for me, the 12 years was like a deal to me. I was like, thank you. I said, yeah, I'll take that. Of course, I wasn't going to tell the government that. I like to play poker, and I think I'm pretty good at it. And you got to have a poker face, so.
Okay, so you take your plea deal, and now you start your sentence. And you started at FCI Milan in Michigan.
Yeah, Detroit, yeah.
Right. And you said this place was a madhouse.
Oh, it was.
Smoking, drugs, drinking, gambling, fighting, and rampant homosexuality.
Yes.
So you said that basically everywhere you went, like, men were having sex with each other.
Well, I wouldn't say every man, but there was homosexuality going on. And it was, I don't know, for some guys it might be okay, but for me it's not okay. It's not my DNA to act like that with another man. I mean,
was it consensual, or were there rapes happening?
Listen. Yeah, there was probably rapes happening that I didn't witness, but I did witness consensual.
Okay, so then you get transferred to Fort Dix.
Let's stick on to Milan, Michigan.
Okay.
I happened to walk in after training in the yard and hitting the heavy bag. And the shower was a communal shower. It was wide open. I walked into the shower, and there was a guy, a black man, and a Hispanic small man, and he had him up, wrapped around him. And it was the grossest thing I ever seen in my life. I cannot tell you. It was, I've seen a lot of things in my life, but it was a bit shocking to me,
Okay.
And, but that's not the only sexual part of that prison that I experienced by seeing, I should say. My first few nights there, I had the top bunk, and there was bars, because it was built in 1933. The prison, I believe, in 1933. And there was bars, so it was wide open. And each inmates had their own cubicles, if you will. Two men in a cubicle and bunk beds. And because the place was so old, they couldn't have individual cells. So I was a light sleeper. I slept with one eye open, especially being new to prison. And I hear this noise, and it wakes me up in the middle of the night. I'm like, what the hell is that noise? And a few cubicles down, there was an inmate. He was gay. I could tell, didn't take a genius to figure out who's gay or who isn't. I mean, prancing around in prison. And they called him Fluffy, as a matter of fact, believe it or not.
Fluffy.
Oh, man. So all of a sudden, the noise stops. And here comes Fluffy out of one of the cubicles of another inmate. There was noise going on down there. And I realized what that noise was, and I realized what he was doing down there with that man. So it was man on man down there. So it was gross. So one day, a couple days later, I'm out in the yard in Danbury. I'm sitting with a bunch of Italian mobsters, from Boston, from New England, and New York, and Chicago, from all over the place, these guys, right? So I'm sitting there, and Fluffy used to do laundry. What do I know about laundry? I mean, personally. So I used to give Fluffy a pack of cigarettes or whatever he wanted or she wanted, and from the commissary, for my laundry. So I'm sitting there with all these mobsters, the only Irish guy, and here comes Fluffy walking by. He said, hey, Red. I was like, yeah. Do you want your laundry done today, Red? I cannot tell you how embarrassed I was because all those guys, all those mobsters were going, hey, Red, you want your laundry done today? I goes, hey, listen, I said, get the fuck out of here. You're never doing my laundry again.
Okay, so you end up getting transferred to Fort Dix.
I end up getting transferred to Fort Dix on a nice bus ride, 12-hour bus ride, shackled.
Well, during this whole time, Whitey's still on the street.
That is correct.
But then in 1995, him and Stevie Flemmi get indicted.
That is correct. And they got indicted not for big stuff at that time, for smaller stuff. And I was sitting in my cell, and I was trying to think, how can I help them guys? Because we still didn't know they were rats. Nobody did. I didn't. And I said, how do I help them survive? How do I discredit their informants that they have against them? In my cell. That's how loyal I was. Holy behold, the lawyers come down, they see me. I give them the information against a rat that they got against them, because I knew the rat. They go. The lawyer does his research. He finds out through a stenographer in court, and he gets all the stenography from the stenographer, all the wordage from the court case that he was involved in. The reason why he was becoming a rat and saying whatever he wanted for the government, and this was the main rat against him at the time, was because he lied on the stand. He perjured himself. He lied. And my lawyer tracked it down, got it, brought it to Stevie Flemmi inside, and said, this is what Red Shea's done. Tell Red I'm indebted to him. That was his words from my jail cell. So I was protecting these guys even while I was inside. And they got that case ended up going away because the big stuff came after that.
Well, Stevie Flemmi stuck around and ended up getting arrested.
Yeah, when he was told he should have just taken off at that moment.
Right, but Whitey Bulger
was smarter than him.
Took off. And he goes on the lam. And you said that he had been planning this his entire life.
That is correct.
He had fake passports everywhere, money everywhere, safety deposit boxes around the world. He would dress up like old ladies, to elude people. Like, he could get in and out of town without anyone even knowing, and he had cash for when he needed it.
That is correct. Well, when they got him, they opened up the walls of his apartment, and he had $800,000 in cash.
Right.
That was just hit on his person, $800,000 in cash.
Who knows about all the other
And
money.
how much exactly.
Well, right. He ends up taking his girlfriend.
And where did they find him? In Santa Monica, California.
We'll get to that. So, yeah, he basically takes one of his girlfriends, bunch of cash, passports, goes cross-country to California, and then nobody knows about him for years. So then, 3 years later, you actually find out that Whitey Bulger had been working with the FBI the whole time.
Tony Cardinelli was the lead lawyer on it, my guy. And he broke it open. And he found out not only was Whitey and Stevie, but he broke it open about the FBI and the underworld in Boston at the time. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of informants that the FBI throughout the years had under their belt that was involved in the underworld in Boston. And yeah, Tony Cardinelli broke that open.
How did you feel when you found out that this guy that you've been looking up to all these years was actually an informant? And he informed against you as well.
He used me as his sacrificial lamb to protect him. So I find out. I call home. I get a guy comes to me in prison. He says, "Hey, just come across the radio. Whitey and Stevie are rats." I didn't hear it. I'm in New Jersey doing my time. I haven't called home yet. I said, "What do you mean?" It come across the radio, Red, and the news. So now I call home. I call Kevin Weeks. He said, "Yes, it's true." I felt like somebody, because I was so loyal and I gave my life to this individual, into the life I gave my life. I felt like somebody just reached through the phone and ripped my heart out. My knees buckled for a minute. They buckled for a minute. Just for a minute. And Kevin Weeks says to me, "But John, I know that there are informants, but I can live with that." I knew right then and there that Kevin Weeks was going to turn when he said that to me.
Yeah, you started calling him Kevin 2 weeks.
I said to him, "You might be able to live with that, but I can't." And I hung the fucking phone up. And I just was completely out of my fucking mind. I could have killed 100 men at that time, if you will, because I was so angry. So I ran, I hit the bag, I was just a madman. And to take the anger out. And eventually, Kevin Weeks decided to cooperate.
Right, 2 weeks later.
Well, I didn't name him 2 weeks. Howie Carr did that from
Okay.
Boston, the news commentator. But I know that he was working on it to do that, preparing for that after the fact, that is. And I got a visit. I got a visit from a person that came to me, and they said to me, "Kevin wants you to understand. He wants you to understand why he's gonna cooperate." And so I said, "Understand what?" "I don't understand that. I don't comprehend that, because I'm a solid guy doing my time. I wouldn't give him up. I wouldn't give anybody up. And now he sent him a message to me? I'm not a light switch. You just can't turn me on and off like that. And I don't condone that." "Well, John, he wants you to understand. And maybe if you don't, maybe he might say more things about you." So I took that as a threat. And I'll never let anybody think that they could hold something over my head, ever in my life, because let's go back to where Whitey said to me, "Don't ever let anybody ever hold anything over your head." I guess he forgot about that. And let me tell you, I said, "Say what you want, do what you want, you tell him I said that. I don't condone it." And that was the end. And that's, it was the last phone call I ever spoke with him. And that was the last words that I had to send back.
Well, when Kevin Weeks starts to cooperate, he actually brings law enforcement to all the dead bodies
That is correct.
that he knew about. How many bodies were there?
At least 4.
4. Okay. And one of the bodies was a woman named Deborah Hussey.
Yeah, now that I do the math, there's more than 4.
How many was it?
I believe 6. Excuse me.
Tell me who Deborah Hussey is.
She was a girlfriend of Stevie Fleming's. And she knew, because of Stevie being, and by the way, she was like a stepdaughter to him. Because Stevie went out with her mother. And she was a young girl. And he took advantage of that. And she eventually found out that they were informants because he told her. He told her that we're informants with the FBI and John Connolly, and we'll always be safe. Holy behold, he revealed that to Whitey. And Whitey said, we got to take care of this immediately. Stevie couldn't do it, so Whitey did. He executed her.
Yeah, he strangled her to death with his own hands. And then when they found the body, she had no fingers, no toes, and no teeth. What was the significance of that?
They did that to another guy, too. That was for dental records and identification.
Oh, so they couldn't figure out who she was.
That is correct.
Wow, okay. How many people do you think that Whitey was involved in killing, if you were to add them all up?
From what I understand, a good 15, 20, easy.
But none of this was happening when you were part of his organization?
None of it. It was all prior to that.
Got it. Okay, so 2002 rolls around. You're 37 years old, and you get released from prison. And you end up doing, about 11 years?
Well, 12 total.
12 total. So you pretty much missed out on all the 90s.
That is correct. I didn't even know what a computer was at the time.
Right. So now you get out. What's that first day like?
Well, as I describe it in the book, when I walked through the doors into the outside, the greatest thing that hit me was the smell, the difference of the smell in the ear. It was like a dark cloud that sat over that prison. I mean, seriously, with this stench. And when I walked out through those doors of that prison and away from that, it was like smelling fresh laundry, if you will. It was the weirdest sense that I ever experienced in my life. And that's the best I can explain it. It was that intense.
Well, you get out, you start working a construction job. But then 9 years later, 2011, after being on the run for 16 years, 12 years on the FBI Most Wanted Fugitives list, they end up finding Whitey Bulger in Santa Monica.
Yeah, but prior to that, as you said, I was working. I get into the construction, the union, and it was the best thing I did because I did it because I made a conscious decision, a smart decision, because I knew from Tony Cardinelli, and as a matter of fact, when I came home, he sat me down to talk to me about it and said, the deck is stacked against you. They're waiting for you. The FBI and everyone else is waiting for you. They believe that when you come home, that you're going to step back into it and take things over. I had a long time. I knew that. I thought ahead of time. I knew they would be waiting for me. And I'm going to tell you something. I knew going back to that life that I would never, ever, there's no chance of me to succeed because there's so many informants. There's so many rats. There are so many of them. There's no way to succeed. So I wasn't going to be another feather in a rat's hat or a federal agent's hat. Either one of them. I was not going to be a feather in their hat ever again. I made that decision. And I went into, I had choices and different unions I could have went into in Boston. And I decided to go into the laborers union in the Irish local. I was accepted. And I was extremely grateful for that because that was the changing of my life at that time and stepping back and not getting back into that world. Though I could have very easily. But I made a conscious decision because I was never going to be a stepping stone for the FBI, the DEA, or any snitch. That said, I went into the construction, and I got a call as I came home, because it was right after I came home from prison. As a matter of fact, when I was coming home from prison, I got a call. Hey, Mark Wahlberg wants to meet you. He's interested in your story. I said, really? So I thought about it. He wanted to come see me in prison. I declined the visit, by the way. So I said, let me think about it. So I hashed it around with some friends and people, because I've never said a word about, my life or anything like that. I said, let me think about it. I said, okay, let's meet up. So I met Mark. I met Mark Wahlberg. We talked.
Another Boston guy, by the way.
Yeah, another great Boston guy. And he said, why don't you come out to L.A.? So I did. Went out to L.A. At the time, it was the Endeavor agency. Mm-hmm. And Ari ran it. And Mark says, I think this guy's got a great story. I want to make something of it. But first, we got to do the book. That's the best way to go. Do the book. So I went into at the time, the book agent for Endeavor. His name is Brian Lipson, who's still my agent today with another company. And Ari calls him, brings me up, brings up Steve Levinson, Mark Wahlberg's right-hand man. He said, what do you think? What do you think? And he goes, is it sellable? Ari says. Brian Lipson says, oh yeah, it's sellable. So we did the book. The book came out and it became a New York Times bestseller. I'm very proud of that. This is a changing of my life.
Congrats.
I took a dark cloud and I made that silver lining into this book, which changed my life. And I say that there are a lot of other stand-up guys out there that should do the same thing, that they can change your lives too after a dark time. There's always a silver lining. So that said, I wrote the book on how to be a man and how to accept your responsibility without giving anybody up in life and doing the right thing. I can walk down any street and hold my head high. When my name's mentioned in Boston, Red Shea, you know what comes behind that? Solid guy. Solid guy. But yet, if you mentioned a rat's name, you know what comes behind their name? A rat. A rat. Just like a lot of guys you had on. And I know you got a great form, and you know what? I'm not knocking you by any means, but I'm knocking the guys that you had on, personally. Borello, Arulada, Sammy the Bull. No good. They got an excuse for everything, and especially that Gene. That Gene, he's got a big mouth. When I see him on your interview, I didn't like him at all. And they get an excuse for everything. And they like to say, oh, this guy, he was a stand-up guy, but he's talking about, like Joey Molino, talking about Joey. And Joey's a solid guy, and he's a friend of mine. There's not many guys like me and Joey. We're solid guys. And sometimes we speak for the guys who are still inside that don't have a voice, that are solid. And another thing, on my Instagram, I have guys that have done time, and they said, thank you, Mr. Shea, for your book, because it helped me get through my time as a man. That book is for men who want to continue to be men. Their books are for rats and teach them how to rat.
I mean, the interesting thing is when I interview guys who cooperate, there's always a reason. So, for example, when I interviewed Sammy the Bull, and he said, well, I would have done 100 years for John Gotti, but then I heard the tape that he was going to turn against me and so forth, and that's why I turned on him.
Let
me just finish. So my follow-up question was, well, okay, I understand why you testified against John Gotti, but then you took the stand against a bunch of other mob bosses who never turned on you. What's the reason for that? He goes, well, I wasn't the only person who cooperated against them, and there was other witnesses and so forth. So there's always a great reason to cooperate.
Exactly, and that's my point. And that said, on my case, he said, oh, John was talking bad about me. And John, he was. I know, because Tony Cardinelli was on that case, the Gotti case, and he cross-examined that piece of shit, okay? But that said, I had guys in my case, when I listened to, that worked for me. When I listened to those tapes, they were laughing because I had that problem in Florida. Maybe you should have got shot or whatever. Why? Because they were jealous. People, you can't help jealousy in life. People are jealous. They become jealous, and jealousy is a bad thing.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, that's what I learned. Now, they talked bad about me, and I heard these tapes. Should I turn and be a rat because they talk bad about me? No, I'll handle you at the appropriate time when the time comes, as the man I am. Well, maybe he should have fucking did that with John Gotti.
Okay, so then 2011 rolls around. By this time, you haven't seen Whitey in, 12, 13 years?
Yeah, easily.
Did you have any idea where he was?
I did not. The last I heard, he was in Chicago.
Okay. So on June 22nd, 2011, 16 years at large, 12 years on the FBI 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list, a $2 million reward for him, the FBI finally finds him in Santa Monica.
Behind Osama bin Laden.
Right, yeah, he was the number 2 guy.
Yeah.
They find $800,000 in cash in the walls of his apartment.
And some guns.
30 guns, fake IDs. And he was living, I remember I saw like a 60-minute special on it. He was living very low key. He wasn't flashy, him and his girlfriend.
Yeah, Mr. Baxter.
Right. He was in his 80s at this point. Nobody had any indication that this was a hardened killer that's just living amongst them. But the FBI knew. So he gets arrested. He pleads not guilty to 48 charges, including 19 counts of murder, extortion, money laundering, obstruction of justice, perjury, narcotics distribution, and weapons violations. When you found out he got arrested, what did you think?
I got a text and they said they got the rat. That's exactly the text I got. They got the rat. Now, of course, I get the text. I was sleeping and I get the text. I look at it. Who's playing games, right? Then I look again. Johnny, they got Whitey. I said, holy fuck. I said, where? So I find out, Santa Monica.
Yeah.
I said, Santa fucking Monica? And I said, where in Santa Monica? So I find out where he was. I cannot tell you, Vlad, I walked by his place at least 4 times when I was in Santa Monica because my friend producer of the Usual Suspect movie and The Way of the Gun, Ken Koken, lived 4 blocks right where he was. And I was out there with him, visiting him, and we walked by that fucking house. Could you imagine, Vlad, if I bumped into him? And I would have recognized him, of course. Could you imagine? Could you imagine if I bumped into him?
What would have happened?
Well, I always had this dream of bumping into him. And it was a dream that I had constantly. And it was in New York City that I bumped into him. And I grabbed him and pulled him into a doorway. And I asked him why. I wanted to know why. Why were you do the opposite of everything that you preached? Why did you give me up? Why did you give everybody up? Why? I wanted to know why. In the dream. He said, I was trying to protect you. I don't know. It's a dream.
That's all it was.
Exactly. Yeah. So in that dream, after he said that, I grabbed him by his jaw and the back of his head, and I snap it. I snap his neck and kill him there on the spot. But unfortunately,
that never happened.
It didn't happen.
Right.
But I'm sure you're going to get to this.
Right. So he gets arrested. He pleads not guilty to all the charges. They extradite him back to South Boston.
Yep.
And goes to trial on 32 counts of racketeering and firearms possession.
That is correct.
Including 19 murders. The trial lasted 2 months with 72 witnesses.
That is correct.
Were you ever asked to be a witness?
Yes.
Really?
I was not asked, but they put me on the list.
Okay.
I got wind of it.
Okay.
Now, mind you, I was working. Well, he was going back every day from court. I was working on a construction site, going up and down on a lift, hoist of the side of the building of that construction site, and watching him brought in every morning with his parade of cops and cars and everything else. I goes, oh, there goes Whitey. And I knew that I was on that list. I called my attorney, Tony Cardinelli. I said, Tony, I'm on that fucking list. And mind you, I was doing multiple interviews on CNN saying, I'll tell you what, they asked me if I would be, would I testify against Whitey if he was, I said, there's no fucking way. There's no way I'll testify against him. I said, I will have contempt of court and go back to jail before I testify. I wouldn't rat on a Martian. Okay? So I called Tony Cardinelli. He called the prosecutor, and he said, listen, and I said this on the interview. I said, but I play poker, as I said to you. I'm a pretty good poker player. And I said, but if I decided that I didn't want to testify, I don't think it would be good for either side. I don't think it would be good for the prosecution, and I don't think it'd be good for Whitey either. So Tony Cardinelli called the head prosecutor. He says, you don't need Red. You got enough people cooperating. And they had Billy Shea, the head of the drugs at the time. They brought him up from Florida. And I heard he was quite elegant on the stand, if you will. And he talked about the drug organization. He talked about how they brought me in and recruited me at the trial. And they talked about, and he talked about how I had the best cocaine there was, the most potent cocaine, he said.
Well, I mean, you're actually in Boston while the trial's happening in Boston.
Yeah.
Were you ever tempted to just show up one day to the courthouse? No.
No.
Wanted no parts of it, huh?
Because I didn't want to see Whitey.
Oh, you didn't want to see him?
No, I didn't want to see him because I don't know if I could have controlled myself.
Oh, you would have just lunged at him in the courtroom?
I Tony Cardinelli, my lawyer, he said, stay away from there, Johnny. So actually I started doing interviews and stuff like that and reaping the benefit off the book. And by the way, when they caught him with all the guns and the money and everything, he had a small library.
And your book was there.
And my book was there.
Yeah, so he read your book.
Oh, he was reading the book, of course.
Okay, so 2 months later, it goes to the jury. They come back guilty on 31 out of 32 counts. He gets convicted for 11 murders, and he gets 2 life sentences plus 5 years. And he was also forced to forfeit $25 million and pay $19 million in restitution. But there was no money.
There was money, but they weren't getting it.
Yeah, I mean, it was $800,000 they found.
They got the $800,000.
Right,
they gave it to victims.
Right, exactly. But the whole $25 million plus $19 million forfeiture, that was never going to happen.
God, I wish I ran into him that day in Santa Monica. I would have loved to gone to that apartment and found that $800,000. Let me tell you, I would have had an extra $800,000 in my pocket. I can guarantee you that.
Okay, he gets found guilty, and he starts his prison term, 2 life sentences plus 5 years. So he's never getting out. He's an old man already. So then, 5 years later, in 2018, he gets transferred to the Federal Transfer Center in Oklahoma City. 8:20 a.m., October 30th, 2018, they find him dead. He was in a wheelchair. He was beaten to death by multiple inmates with a sock wrapped with a padlock and a knife.
A lock and a sock.
Yeah. Lock and a sock. And a homemade knife. They gouge out his eyes, and they almost tear out his tongue.
That's what you do to a rat.
When the COs find him, they couldn't even figure out who he was because he was so mangled. When you found out about the murder, what'd you think?
I was upset that it wasn't me.
So it made you mad that you didn't get to do it yourself?
It made me upset that I didn't get to do it. Yes.
Well, when they investigated, there was a Massachusetts mafia hitman named Fautois Freddie Geis.
Geese.
Fautois Freddie Geis. He was a primary suspect. So he gets indicted along with Paul J. DiCalagaro and Sean McKinnon. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing these names right.
You're pretty close, yep.
And ultimately, by 2024, last year, there was a plea deal that basically they accept 25 years for voluntary manslaughter. But weren't they already doing life in prison at the time?
Not both. Freddie was, but not those 2 other guys. As a matter of fact, the Sean, he's already out of prison. Because he they said he was basically a lookout guy. That's what they said at the time. But Freddie took the main brunt of it. Freddie took the hit. The other guy, he'll be out not too long. And Colin Gerio, by the way. And but Freddie took the brunt of it. He admitted to it.
Do you have any idea why they did it?
Yeah, because he's a rat.
Just because he's a rat.
And you got to realize, there's rumors that Whitey didn't like Colin Gerio or whatever back in the day or whatever and all that stuff. But basically it was because he was a stone cold rat. And he was, let's face it, he might have been a stone cold rat, but he was a legend. He was a legend before we found out that it was a rat, right? Because it was head of the Irish mob, Whitey Bulger, and, a mystique individual and all that.
Well, yeah. I mean, Johnny Depp did the movie Black Mass, where he played Whitey Bulger.
Well, me and Johnny have pictures together. And
right. You were on set?
With Johnny, yeah. Yeah.
When you watch that movie, how close did Johnny Depp capture Whitey Bulger?
I think he did a really, really good job, a really excellent job. Johnny's a A-League by far, to say the least. A magnificent actor. And Johnny, we were out to dinner, and Johnny said, "Hey, John, Red, you want to come to the set?" I said, "Yeah, sure." He said, "Good, you'll be my guest." So I met Johnny. We met at the hotel, and his hotel, and we were staying, and his wife at the time, Amber Heard. And we went to the set. So me and Johnny are hanging out, and he says, "I got to go get made up." So we go into the trailer, and there was a bust of Whitey. And I'm looking at it going, interesting, you know? And I'm sitting in a chair while Johnny's starting to get made up as Whitey. And he started looking so realistic like Whitey to me. I started getting sick to my stomach, because I swear to God. And I wanted to, my reaction was to kill him. I had to get up. I had to control myself, get up, and go out the trailer to get air. I got some fresh air. I recuperated, and I came back and I explained it to Johnny, and Johnny said, "I am so sorry. I forgot that you hadn't seen him in so long, and the circumstances and all that." He said, "Johnny, Red, I am so sorry." Johnny was so apologetic, and I almost wanted to.
You almost beat up Johnny Depp.
I wanted to beat the shit out. I wanted to beat the shit out of Johnny Depp because he was looking like Whitey Bulger. Yes.
Well, John
so that should sum it up and how good he looked.
Yeah.
I also wanted to beat up Alec Baldwin one time when I was with Mark Wahlberg, but that's another story.
It's another story. Well, John Red Shea, I appreciate you coming in and telling your story. I mean, we interview a lot of people from this life, but 95% of them have cooperated. You're one of the few. There's like 3 guys, I think, total that actually did their time, didn't cooperate, and really standing on these principles. And but unfortunately, this is not the way crime works. You know, I remember when I interviewed Freeway Ricky Ross, who was one of the biggest drug dealers in America. His own connect guy testified against him and gave him life in prison. And at first he was mad, but then he realized a few years later that cooperating comes with drug dealing. So you can't be mad about it. You have to just assume that it happens. And ultimately, that's what happens 99% of the time. This guy I just interviewed, Lil Woody, he was part of the Young Thug trial. You know, when he was locked up in the feds, someone told him there's 2 types of prisoners. Ones who cooperated and ones who wish they cooperated. So this is just the way the legal system works. And you're somewhat of a unicorn when it comes to this.
I disagree with that. I never wished that I cooperated, ever.
You're a unicorn. You're one of the few that really was, willing to do your time and not get it shaved off by telling on the people that you worked with.
And just to finish up, I'd like to say in the end here, you have your informants that you had on, and they like to say, "Oh, that guy, he's an informant too. He didn't testify anybody, but he's telling his story." Well, you know what? Just because you're a rat, you're not the only one who has a voice in this world. There are stand-up guys out there that have voices, and I'm one of them.
Well, you did your time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what? I earned that.
Mm-hmm. That's what it is, John. Appreciate you coming in. Wish you all the best. And make sure everyone reads Rap Bastards. New York Times bestseller.
Thank you, Vlad. Thank you for being a gentleman.
Of course. Till next time. Peace.